Right, well, good afternoon, everyone, or evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to the first of our case studies. Not that we have another one prepared yet, but this is the first time we've done a case study like this, where we're actually going to sit and watch a whole game in full and talk about a bunch of different things that are going to happen during it. This is the last of our officiating webinar series for this season, most likely. But we will be very interested to hear from you what you think about this as a case study, doing a case study like this to see if we should look at other ones in the future. I kind of have one set aside right now that I think would be good yet. That's actually an NRL game that might be a good case study. And I am, of course, interested in looking for others. So we're just going to kick off here, making sure that we do our territory acknowledgement. While we are a proud Canadian organization, we acknowledge that our head office is located on traditional, unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Ring It Canada extends our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples for their valuable contributions to this land. We are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. We're going to begin with introductions of our speakers, so myself and Lauren. We're not going to go through introductions of the whole group today. I'm going to stop presenting this for a second and stop my screen share just so that you can see us. But hi, I'm Paul Shipman. I'm one of the master instructors for officiating for Ring It Canada, as well as the chair of the working group right now that's working on redeveloping all of our clinic and developmental materials. I think I'm going to leave it at that. Today, we're going to get to see me ref 10 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that, when I was a 2C official wearing a helmet on my camera. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Lauren, camera on your helmet?
Camera on your
helmet,
yeah,
not a helmet on your
Thank
helmet.
you. Yeah.
And this is why we work in pairs for some of these, and officiating full on. So I'm Lauren Coster. I'm out of Alberta. I work for Ring It Alberta itself, doing officials development. And I am an instructor. So like I said, I just did a level 1 clinic. So that was quite fun. An evaluator and a level 4 official as well. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there as well. Oh, I am in the clinic work group with Paul as well, because there's some great new stuff coming around. Like we just did an update of our level 1 stuff. And so far I'm a big fan. So
yeah, absolutely.
Going really well.
All right. Sharing my screen again. Let's get back to that. So that's the gist of who we are. Today, this is what we're looking at. So we've got a 45-minute video that we're going to watch. It is a complete game. There's going to be some slowdowns and some speed ups depending on what's going on. Like, for example, I fast forwarded all the stoppages so that we don't have to sit here and watch stoppages happen. At any time during the video, feel free to unmute yourself and interject with questions, preferably one at a time. Lauren or I may make the call to pause the video at times and or move forward and backward so that we can maybe watch something that happened again. At some points, we might kind of ask the group questions to get your idea of what happened on the ice. When we do that, we're going to ask you guys to use the chat function to submit your answers. And what we want to do there is we want you to type your answer but not send it. We're going to ask everyone to send their answers at the same time so that we can kind of minimize the impact of one person answering and that kind of leading everyone down the same path. At halftime of the game, we're going to take a 5-minute break just so that we aren't all sitting in front of a screen for too long. And hopefully 2 hours is going to be enough. We did a session a week ago on more tough calls. That video was a grand total of 14 minutes. But I think we got a lot more in depth into those calls than we're likely going to do today. That session lasted an hour and a half, so I'm a little concerned that a 45-minute video, what that's going to mean in a 2-hour slot, but we're going to see. As I said, we've never done this before online, so I'm as interested as anybody else to see how it's going to come through.
And then I will just, sorry, I'm just going to interject. This is the whole fun part. Me and Paul are in different areas, so I might accidentally overspeak. If anytime you guys do have some questions that you guys put in the chat, I will try and monitor that as much as possible. If it's a direct question that is an immediate something, that's when you guys would unmute. But if it's a question that doesn't need a direct, quick answer, put it in the chat and I will do my best to respond to those or leave them for the end.
There is probably 10 minutes of the game at the very beginning that there's not a lot going on. We're going to get to see at least one penalty call in that time, as well as some other things that are going on. We're not likely to stop the video during that time. Laura and I talked about this, and we're going to kind of just sort of speak over the video with kind of our interjections. But definitely, if you see anything that you want to focus on, feel free to speak up, and we'll pause and move back or whatever. So our objectives for today, the reason I really wanted to do a case study of a whole game is because one of the things that we hear a lot in evaluations, or that I say a lot in evaluations in some cases, is that we have to consider the fit of our penalties, how they fit the game. And sometimes that's presented as whether or not we're being consistent in the game in terms of our penalty calls and things like that. And I think it's really a really valuable tool for us to learn how to kind of understand when a penalty fits and when it doesn't. And I think that the best way to see that is to watch a whole game so that we can understand how the players are playing, what calls have been made in the past, and how they should inform the calls that we make later on in the game. We also want you to see that how we watch the game is just as important as what we watch. And I think that that'll become clear as we go through this video. As a group, we're going to try to identify some positioning misses, again, so that we can help everyone have a better understanding of things that they can look for in their own game that they can improve on. And finally, we're going to get to see how the calls and non-calls that we make early in the game impact the future play in the same game. So some things that I wanted everybody to know for sure going into this video. The game is from 2010 or 2011. The rules then were different. The movable ring did not exist. So we're going to see a bunch of immovable ring stoppages where the ring goes to the team that it would not go to today. Major penalties that were called due to initial contact being from behind or to the head. That is a rule that post-dates this game. So if we see anything that's like from contact from behind or to the head or anything like that, it's not going to be called as a major penalty in this game, but it would be today. And also the rules about goalie ring or defensive zone free pass when the ring goes out of the zone, or out of bounds, I should say, didn't exist at this time either. This is a 2C game, so we are looking at a U14B game, a game that should be performed by 2C officials, and a game that would result in a 2C evaluation for an official who was meeting level 2 requirements. So knowing that, we want to go in as a group, not assuming that the on-ice calls are always correct. We want to go in knowing that the officials often follow too close as the back official and often don't hustle enough to get ahead as the lead official. Neither of those things are bad things. They're kind of expected performance out of a level 2. It's just we want to see and recognize those things and kind of have an understanding of why it would be better if they were different. And finally, at the time of this game, I had been a non-skater when I started as a referee. I hadn't skated in my life. So you'll see that I wear wrist guards at that time. And we are in Manitoba, and it is not unusual for referees in Manitoba to wear gloves when they are officiating, even though I don't do that anymore. All right. Let's get to the video. Any questions or comments before we get started? Can anyone not see the video? All right, here we go.
Sounds good. Takes a second to get used to a little bit of the shakiness, but you will.
what's just happened is the buzzer has gone. And the officials have not taken the time to go and figure out why or talk to the timekeepers. And we'll see later that they should have.
Off white!
I really like that verbal with the point. The verbal is the most important part with that one.
But we will notice that this official has gotten too close to the play as the back official.
Two!
And I like that this official went ahead of the blue line, because you always want to stay ahead of it. So he had the chance to stop, but he went ahead.
Two!
So what we have here is we've got the violation when red checks white early, and that resulted in that official counting the 5-second delayed violation for that scenario.
One thing that you guys will find throughout this video is this official is also pretty good at keeping his body open to the play. So he might not always be in the right positions, but in most of the senses, he is trying to stay open and using the transitions to see all of the play.
Break! Break!
Going down.
What
Nice
you'll
little
notice there is
teamwork
that,
switch.
yes,
Sorry.
that's exactly what I was going to comment on.
Good job.
So we'll have heard the buzzer go off again here. So now the official's actually going to go and speak to the timekeepers about it. This is a case where I felt comfortable enough with the technology to try to figure out the clock and correct that issue. If you don't have to go in a box and figure it out. But communicate with the timekeeper that there's a problem and see if they can solve it.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Is there anywhere to walk this?
Again, good teamwork.
Notice that we took that opportunity to switch sides of the ice again. So in that case, the goalkeeper grabbed the ring while it was outside of the crease and brought it in, causing a crease violation.
If there was more players in and around that crease, that's when we'd start thinking about the delayed game penalty. But this one had no one around for an imminent scoring opportunity. So it's just a whistle. Well, just a violation. Okay, so one of the reasons that that official may have stayed on that free play line a little bit is because there was some action going on at that free play line.
To Allison's question in the chat, what we're looking for that penalty is for someone actually to be in a distance where they could reach and grab that free ring and shoot it into the net. So we're looking for an imminent scoring opportunity, not just any scoring opportunity.
And I think that was a 2019 rule change addition, imminent scoring
Correct.
opportunities. So they've added that to the rule book for clarity.
So by now we should notice that this is a pretty standard U14B game, not super fast, a little bit scrambly, lots of play close to each other.
Lots of stops starting for you as the refs.
Yeah.
Did anyone else notice that head look? So he's on the free play line. There's a bunch happening in the zone, and they decided to look up ice. And so that's just giving himself an opportunity to see what's up there, what the threats are, to know if he's got to bust it hard or go a little bit slower. Okay, so you always want to be behind the ring, or as this one would have been ahead of the ring. So making sure that we're ahead and above. So if it comes off the free play line, also move off the free play line with it.
Notice the partner right now at the blue line. So this is an opportunity for us to make a decision about what we need to do here in terms of deep right cover, right? So there is a risk up ice that the ring could turn around and we don't have a lead official. Ideally, the official on the blue line would have continued pushing up so that they would have been nearer those two players, but not involved in the play, so that if play turned around, they could slip to the other side. But as their partner, I mean, you can see how close we are. You know, myself or us, from our perspective, are on the free play line, while our partner is, you know, not even quite at the blue line yet. So there is an opportunity, if we thought it was necessary, for us to skate up the ice to get ahead of the play.
Tip! Nice wait, Taylor.
So our partner has a penalty. We're going to get to watch it here in slow motion, and I might make it play twice. It's going to be a hooking penalty. We want to watch for the high stick up in the armpits. It is tough to see. We'll watch the whole thing all over again. It's right here. So you can see here how Red's stick is just, I guess, not quite up in the armpits, but under the elbows and across the player's body. So it is a case of hooking, right? If we follow the rule book specifically, that is a stick that's hooked up along the body. The question we would want to ask ourselves is, what's the impact of that overall on the play?
21 for hook.
And in the new rules, the ring would go all the way into the attacking zone, right? So that's another one of those.
Yes. Yes, I should have flagged that too.
It's just one of those easy ones that we remember. Paul, there's a question in the chat. Does it matter that she doesn't have the ring?
So I think
On the hooking
we're
penalty.
asking about the penalty, right, Jill?
Yeah.
In which case I would say, yes, I think it does matter in this case that she doesn't have the ring, right? When we think about our penalty philosophy and the idea that we want to see a material impact to the play, was there really a material impact on the white team that was going to impact their ability to shoot and score or pass to another player? And I think that there probably wasn't. I might come back to that penalty a little later on. So again, we want to start thinking about the fit of penalties in the game. And I guess I'm going to ask the group, maybe throw something in the chat about what you think about this. But if we think back to that hooking penalty, how do we think it fits in the game? Like, does it seem significant enough to put your arm up? So take a minute, maybe just type a yes or a no in the chat, and then in 10 seconds.
And pretend you all saw it, because I know the video replay shows that it's quick, and so, but pretend as a ref, you definitely saw that action.
And you can click send whenever you're ready. Yeah, so I would tend to agree. I would tend to agree overall that I don't really think that it fits the game. And I think we'll see better examples of why it doesn't fit the game in a little bit when we start seeing some non-calls.
And there was another comment in here that I kind of just want to pull out, and you can start it at any time. The using of verbals, that's a great way to stop some of these penalties. So maybe that would have been the thing that we would have used there, is a nice verbal. Sticks, right?
I'm going to call out right now the positioning of the back ref, that this probably is not the right choice to make skating wise. We probably want to wait for those players to pass us so that we can follow them up the ice. Right now, this referee, myself, is quite involved in the play. Okay, so we're going to get to watch this hit again. And so when we're watching this, we want to consider that we've already kind of sent a message already in this game about what kinds of things we're going to call, right? We had that hooking, we saw the hooking, we saw the impact of the hooking. How similar is this scenario? And would we say that it fits the game the same, better, or worse?
In the chat, if you guys want to say same, better, worse. Just a simple one answer, one word thing. And press send whenever now. We'll go with whenever.
Yeah.
Because I think they all come through pretty quick. Okay. There we go. So everyone's agreeing that it should be a penalty, and one saying better. So what are some of those considerations in front of the net, right? Like they're in front of the net, maybe a little bit more of a scoring opportunity, scoring chance. So maybe that penalty was more than the other one.
Yeah.
Positioning wise in that, right? So that's something to consider too. Where on the ice is it happening? Because something like that versus center ice, you might not call it at center ice, but because it was in front of the net, you might want to call it. So there's just some of those kind of things to think about as well with the fit of the game.
And to some extent, we might want to think about, did she still have a good scoring opportunity or not? Was that whole play completely the responsibility of the white player who was behind her, or was it impacted by the white player who crossed in front of her, potentially making red put on the brakes too fast? So there's lots of things to consider here. At the end of the day, I don't really know, if I watch it again, even if I'm sure that it's definitely a penalty, but I think it's a bigger penalty than the penalty we called already. So in the context of what we've started calling in this game, I think that this penalty would be a penalty to call. And to Angela's question, body contact. We can see how white's going to contact red's hip here, which is kind of where the play starts. And I do think that red begins slowing down because white's crossing in front of her. And that does, she has a responsibility to avoid body contact as well. And if she starts putting on the brakes without white having the opportunity to avoid, it starts to absolve white of some of her responsibility. That said, again, because we want to talk about fit and consistency, given what we've already called in this game, this is probably a good body contact call overall. But we're going to let it go. So now we have to start considering that last point I put in our objectives as to what does that start to inform the future game to look like, right? We set a bar around that hooking penalty. Now we're messing with that bar a little bit around this body contact penalty. Exactly. So to Patrick's point, I wouldn't necessarily say the more rough play specifically, but the players are definitely going to need to explore more what they can get away with, right? Because this weird thing happened that wasn't really a big deal probably to any of the players on the ice. They got called as a penalty. But now someone did something that was maybe a little more aggressive and we let it go. And so now players are probably starting to think, I wonder what else I can get away with. Although they're also U14B, so I don't know how much they're thinking about that, but U16Bs were.
So we've left that free play line just a little bit too late. So a little anticipation on that free play line. And that's kind of why I said before, that head movement, that look is so, so important, right? Because you know that people are there. So you can react a little sooner, anticipate.
Again, maybe a little too close as the back official. The risks in being too close like that are A, that you can't get to the net in time, and B, that you end up being involved when that play turns around right in front of you.
You want to pause there?
Yep. So we had a bit of a tumble there. I'm going to go back a couple seconds so we can see it a little better. So we wanted to talk on this a little bit about movement and a little bit about responsibility. So we aren't going to have a great view of what happens here as the on-ice official at the net. Arguably, our partner looking down the boards probably has a better view and can make a better decision about it. But this is maybe a scenario where we can also talk about movement at the net.
So right here, he's looking straight through the net, right? So you're going to want to step off that line, and in this case, to the back, because that's where you're going to be able to see more and not look through the goalie as well. So you're going to want to step back, and then that will be able to let you see that play, because obviously right now you're not seeing any of the action that's happening. But your partner should also have a decent view of it, because they should be right on the boards looking down, right?
Yeah. So this moment right here is probably the moment that you need to push off the goal line, where you recognize that this challenge is happening and that there's a risk that a penalty could happen. And also being clear that you just don't have a good enough view to really know what's going to happen.
Right. So we see a player falling down and we have no idea what's really happened to them. So
and we can see that this official is making the decision to move, but they're making it too late. They're making it after the initial fall began. And that's too late to see what actually happened.
This is another one of those anticipation pieces.
Good job, Sydney.
Oh, got a little too close, a little too far up.
Yeah.
Luckily, no shot. So, whew. Okay, so notice how the official turned around to watch what was in the corner. So you want to make sure that you're turning around when there's two players going into the corner. If it's just one, we don't care, right? So just keep that in mind. It will happen a couple other times. So when you see it on the video, it just looks really clean.
Touch white.
Good verbal.
No shot clocks don't sound the same everywhere, but that's the sound of a shot clock in Manitoba. So here's a immovable ring scenario where we ended up giving the ring back to red team because that's what we did at the time. But that would have been a case where it should have gone with the goalie in today's rules. Again, same thing, removable ring around the boards. Went back to the goalkeeper's team because that's who had it going in. But by today's rules, should go to the red team.
The only time that you're really ever giving it back to the team that had control in the first place, or one of the best examples, is when the other team is not actively checking. And that means that they are not actually doing their duty in the immovable ring situation. So therefore, it would go back to the team that had the initial control. So that's one of the cases now that it would go back.
10, 14, 13.
Paul gets stuck on the side quite a lot during this period.
Yeah.
Stays here the whole time. Ooh, too close, too close.
Too close, indeed.
And
This is
again,
why. That's a really good example of why I was too close. When that ring turned around, when the play turned around, it put me in a really tough position as lead official. Where if I had been back even with that white player near center, when the pass got to her, I would have been in a much better position to take the lead.
we've got, I think there's a situation coming up soon where anticipation is needed, but also busting your butt and going quick, right? That just turns over. So you just got to make sure you go, go, go to get out of that. Right? Just a lot of stopping and starting for our officials, you know, back and forth play. Okay, now here the lead official is coasting, coasting, coasting. He can get to that net a lot sooner before that shot actually happens. That last third, we don't need to coast. We can go a little faster in that one, right? Move your feet. So we're gonna probably see it, I think it's this one again, where it's the same kind of situation. They've let it get too close to them and they're coasting into that corner.
Yep.
Keep skating on two blue line. Don't slow down to signal, especially when a situation like that happens where the person going to get the ring is going to be challenged.
Especially close to the net, because goal could happen right away after.
Absolutely.
I like that one.
Mm-hmm. Look at this closely. How she pokes that stick right into her back skate, right?
So it looks like she goes over the ring, but because her stick's white, it's a little harder to see in the video. But yeah, she definitely gets her a little bit on it.
Oh, geez, I'm on the wrong screen. Hold on a second here. I'm going back. I've gone too far. Okay, here we go.
You can see it in the second action with the foot. There.
So I want to stress here, I want to go back to that conversation about fit in the game, right? So far in this game, our officials have called the hooking in front of the net. We saw the body that happened in front of the net, and as a group felt that was probably a little more elevated than the hooking. Where do we feel as a group this scenario falls? Let's throw some comments in the chat and wait for Lauren or I to give you the okay to send. That should probably be good. Send out what you're thinking.
I like how it's a fury when that happens. I like that.
Yeah. Good. So good comments overall. So what Angela said is a really important point to focus on. Like it is definitely tripping, but it is difficult to see, right? Now we are looking at a video which has lower resolution and fuzziness that our eyes don't experience themselves when we're on the ice. So it might be something that the referee could spot more easily. Remember, there are two of us on the ice too, right? And our partner should, when this is happening, because we're coming into the zone, our partner should be relatively across from it and potentially have a better shot of that stick coming into the back foot. And I think some of the other comments about maybe she was already losing her balance first aren't those are valid comments, and that's definitely something that you need to assess as the official on the ice. Was that player going off balance, or was it because of the stick? But at the end of the day, red also needs to not poke that player with the stick, right? Like if the player was slightly off balance and the stick sent it the rest of the way, that's still on red. So yeah, I think that those are all good comments. I would lean towards a tripping penalty in this case, particularly given the fit inside of the hooking that we had and the body that we probably should have had, right? The tripping in the body probably feel more like they fit the game than even the hooking did at the beginning, kind of thing. Yeah, I think those are the things that I want to say about it.
And I really like the comment about across the ice too, right? Because your partner across the ice should have a decent view of maybe where that stick hit the skate in a different way than you did, right? Because you're looking into it and they're looking at the full scale of it.
Okay, so intermission. This is the halfway point. I said we would take 5 minutes. I think we're still going to take 5 minutes. I want to say that the second half of this game is much more interesting. There weren't a lot of scenarios going on in the first half, but the second half definitely gets more interesting, and we're going to get to expand our conversation about what does the game really look like now? What do penalties look like, considering what happened in the first half versus what's going to happen in the second half. So let's, do I have those little minute videos still around? Give me 1 second here.
Are you talking about the understanding videos?
No, no, no.
Oh, okay.
I made, like 5-minute videos for the clinic.
Oh, nice.
As like a countdown thing.
Some really great comments too, by the way. Everyone has something a little interesting in a good way to say. So I appreciate that. You guys are giving us some good,
all right,
content.
I'm going to put this up on the screen and run it. And when it's done, we will come back and continue.
Perfect.
All right, if you're back, we are gonna kick off this second half. Get into some more
Thank you.
exciting game. Here we go.
Although it does start out the same for a
Yes,
while.
for a couple minutes.
It does kind of slowly get into it.
Break.
Okay, still a little too close is the back official. Right.
And singing. Back official singing.
Paul, can you put your mouse back on the timing?
Yeah,
14 on
That just helps me with my notes.
gotcha.
Thank you.
Oh, it goes away on its own. Maybe I have to leave it there.
Tip. Break.
Okay, come off that line a little sooner.
Brace. Reds, right? Break.
Our partner on the other side could probably benefit from leaving the free play line forwards more than he does. I think because he
So
leaves
turning.
backwards, he ends up coasting too much through the neutral zone.
Yeah. And there was another great example of turning with the players into the corner there because they had the ring.
Fourteen, 25, 13.
Okay. So it's sitting on the net, so therefore it needs to be a whistle. It's not playable.
To answer Angela's question, yeah, it depends on which team results in the ring resting on the net. So the team that got it on the net is the one that loses it. So if the attacking team was the team that resulted in the ring getting on the net, it would go to the goalie's team.
Yeah.
So here's a good scenario here. We can see the pressure on the defending
On the
player
skate.
against the boards. We can see how the player comes down. So it is a scenario again where the referees on the ice aren't making a call. But I think in the context of all of the things that we've seen in the game, that there is probably the biggest penalty we've had so far.
Right? She pushes her into the boards. So, and then another push here into the hips, still into the boards, and then she does fall as well.
And
So
she is making the decision to push that girl into the boards. So definitely a boarding situation.
and then the other thing that was being said there was the example of a defensive zone free pass, free ring, and I might just bring that to the end of the game and talk about that. Or do you want me to talk about it now?
Go ahead.
Okay, so if it ever takes up too much time, that's the easiest kind of way to like conceptualize it is if you have to like pause and go grab a new ring because it's gone out of play completely, then that's when we would go defensive free pass, like an injury or out of the play completely. Or in the most cases of the goalie ring, it's been changed to goalie ring to keep up the speed of the game. So if it's gone off the net and just simply back in, or like that one onto the top of the net, then we can just keep it in and go to a goalie ring right away. So that's for the speed of the game.
Yeah, the defensive zone free pass is going to be more if the ring goes behind the boards, like outside of the playing area, and stays there, or potentially like if you have an injured player in the zone, then the ring's going to go to the defensive zone. On David's comments, I want to go back to the boarding scenario here, and I want us to think about the point of emphasis from your most recent refresher. So one of the point of emphasis is on move it or lose it, or when we would call a boarding penalty or when we would call a holding penalty. So I think that ignoring whether or not red let up on her, ignoring the fact that white does fall over in the end, if we look at just the point of emphasis on the immovable ring, we can see that red is not really actively checking the white player and instead is using her body position to shove her into the boards, which is should either result in a holding penalty or a boarding penalty, depending on the severity of the contact. I would suggest that in the first minutes here, it's definitely enough for holding, but it's that fall at the end that will get us to the boarding scenario. Right? She's not trying to check the girl with her stick. She's only trying to drive her into the boards.
And she gives her no time and space. So there's the body contact, 0 time. It's right next to next. Right?
Yeah. So Allison, I would say we probably wouldn't call both. Realistically, if you were the official on the ice and you were making the call, what you're going to do is you're going to blow your whistle as soon as you decide it's a penalty in that case, because you're deciding it's a penalty because of the immovable ring aspect of it, and therefore the ring is immovable, and it's immovable because red is pressing her into the boards. So potentially you're blowing your whistle before we ever get to boarding and we're just ending up with holding, or you might make the decision that it's all coming out of the one play. At the end of the day, we have to make a decision about giving white an advantage back, right? Like red is stealing advantage from white by committing a penalty to prevent her from being able to play the ring. She didn't end up not getting to play the ring twice. So we really only want to penalize her once for it. And we certainly don't want to give white a double advantage of like 4 minutes of penalties for the one impact of what's happening there, right? So she did do both, you're not wrong. And in this scenario, both actually happened in the game because of what the officials called, or the decision they made not to make a call there. But if you were making the decision to make that call, ideally we would have you focus on the one and choose the one that is more severe. So in that case, I would ask you to choose the boarding call to be the one that you report. You might call 2 penalties on a player at once. That would be in a case where they committed 2 penalties with enough separation in between the 2 that they weren't part of one play, I think would be a good way to explain that.
Tip!
guys do a lot of two blue lines. If we were playing with a movable ring, because obviously this is before it, we might have started to consider them on the boards going slow to consider starting to whistle. But that's consideration. And sorry, I went over this.
That's okay.
Go back.
We know how to go
Sorry.
back. So our partner is going to call a penalty here in the zone. That was it there. We're going to try to see it here. It's a little difficult to see. We're far away from it and players are blocking our view.
Okay, so nice delayed penalty. Keep that arm straight as long as you can.
15 red for holding.
So just to come back to our conversation about fit and consistency, it's pretty difficult for us to see there exactly what happened and how impactful it was. But I think that we can kind of get a sense of how it felt in the game versus like the boarding that we just saw, or compared to the body contact that we had earlier in front of the net, or the tripping that we might have seen at the blue line, and in comparison with the hooking that started us off with everything, right? So that's really the story that I want you guys to be able to take away from the game today, is starting to get that idea of how do those all feel? How do they feel that they fit inside of the game? And given that we're going to give white an advantage here of, you know, 5 versus 4, how does that compare to what that holding looked like? And how did that holding compare to these other things we're letting go? And what is that communicating to the teams about what they can do and what they can't?
You put your mouse back up so I can see what
Oh,
time
yeah.
it is.
So this one's a little ugly. It's an ugly play. I don't know that I would call anything here. And the officials on the ice are not going to call something here. White kind of trips herself up on the boards there, maybe got driven a bit there by red stick. It brings red down accidentally.
I wouldn't mind a trip though, either, because it's one of those, like, her stick was in the skates and it did stop her from getting after and going for that ring.
Yeah,
So
that is
if that's
fair.
the consideration, then that's the consideration, right?
Yeah, so that is fair, and that is a fair comment. We do want to call trips when a player should have been in better control of where their body or their stick was, where it's going to bring somebody down. So this is a situation where white does fall kind of on her own when her skates hit the boards. So to answer Christy's question, I'm going to back up here a bit. Oh, geez, I've gone too far. There we go.
It's hard with
You
this
see
one.
here that red's contact isn't causing anything yet. Really, it's when white hits the boards there. If you see where her skates,
The front of the skate, the toes hit the boards.
Yeah, so like I see that one, but then you also see white taking out red, kind of like from my
Yeah.
perspective anyways. White's taking out red at the end, right, and taking her down.
yes.
So that's why it's like, do you put both in or do you put none in?
There's another
Well,
consideration there. But Paul,
Go ahead, Lauren, go ahead.
well, there's a consideration there because, like, white kind of mostly did that to herself. So why would you give red a tripping penalty for that? But then if you're going to call white on something, it's because she's literally leaving her stick in where the other person's skates are, and it took her away from being able to get the ring. Like, if you're going to use that same concept of who gets the material impact here, white falling doesn't have a material impact for white to get the ring. So why would red go down one for that? So in that kind of context, a red penalty wouldn't really fully make sense here to me, with that consideration.
Yeah.
Right.
I will say, just because I'm reading some of the other comments as well, my read on this play is it is completely accidental. It's really just bad luck that white's stick ended up between red's legs as white was going down. White goes down on her own. It happens to bring red down because of where her stick ended up. That doesn't absolve her of the potential penalty. So we could still call a penalty on white for tripping red here. One of the things to ask ourselves about advantage is that we can see out of this play that white, the other white player, the one on the left there, is going to get the ring. So red really doesn't have an opportunity to get the ring if this trip didn't happen. So that's something we want to consider from an advantage perspective. We're also going to see the player on the far left, the red player, well, not on the furthest left, but more left to the white player yet, is going to end up in a good checking position. So we're not going to lose the opportunity as the red team to be checking the white player when the white player gets the ring and starts playing up. And to Allison's comment, absolutely, right? We're watching it at slow-mo right now. It looks completely different when it's fast. And we have to figure out how to watch the game as an official so that we can kind of be far enough back that we can see it all as it happens. And we have to make like a split-second decision. So I probably wouldn't even fault someone for potentially calling red and white or making the decision to call neither because they thought that they both did it, right?
As long as you can explain yourself and know why and how, then when you get asked this question, then you know what's going on. So if in your head you know what's going on, then you're probably going to have the right kind of call or whatever. I'm watching her fall in slow-mo. It is different, right? Slow-mo gives you a way better viewpoint of it all, and you're not going to have slow-mo in a game. It's not. I don't even have slow-mo in my brain.
But don't worry, everybody. It's about to get much more interesting than even that.
Ooh, so much going on.
Down here, the player who just got the ring loses it to a check to that red player who came across. They both go and they're going to go argue the ring, right? They're combating for the ring here, pressing up really hard against each other, getting a little physical, got some body work going on. Then white goes in to hold and interfere to prevent red from even being able to play the ring. Then she goes down by getting tripped by white a little bit because of the way that white left her stick out in front of her. But that's not all that goes on. We actually have to watch the other players too.
As Christy says,
get up after their little tripping situation. 24 is not happy with what happened, and she runs the white player and bowls her over.
So this is one of those other moments where you can't fully have ring focus. You need to be able to like bring your focus out and watch some more of the play. It's hard to do, but here's a good example of when it is necessary.
Yeah, so that's the really big takeaway from this particular event on the ice. So we have 3 potential penalty situations that are happening within 5 seconds of each other. It's really important that we not put our eyes directly on the ring and leave them there the whole time. It's also important that we not just focus on the 2 players who are fighting for the ring, because there's something else going on the left-hand side that if we were totally focused on the people fighting over the ring, we would miss it. It's also really important that we work with our partner here, right? Our partner, based on their positioning and what they're going to be most focused on, are definitely going to miss the bowling over that happens in front of the net, because they have every reason to be much more interested in the person who has the ring because they are way more interested in the crease and way more interested in a goal. So as the free play line official, you need to be much more open to all of the players in the triangle and not just the two who are combating for the ring.
Yeah, it's a really important part. Your
11
positions.
white for interference. She just skated into the other
Right.
goal and she was pushing the other goal back. So she was preventing that goal from.
So in that play, the only one that the officials on the ice in this game got was the interference that white did on red as the two players combating over the ring. Remember when white was pushing her back, preventing her from playing the ring? So that's the only call we made there. We didn't get the trip that red performed on her immediately after, and we didn't get the contact beside the net. One of the things that we can talk about at this point is the possibility of preventing penalties by calling one early, right? So there's a few things going on here. I think that the three things that happen around the net in that scenario all really fit our game really well. If we're trying to call the things that fit our game, the body contact of the red player who runs the white player definitely is something that we want to call in that scenario. The interference that white played on red, I would call it holding. So when white was holding red off of playing the ring, that's probably a pretty good call to make in that case. And then the trip that red performs on white in that same sequence around the net. One could argue, though, that if we'd made either of the potential tripping calls at the top of the free play line a second earlier, that whole sequence never happens, right? So if we make a decision to call white for her penalty, potentially on red, we get in a scenario where we've prevented some other stuff from happening. I think a bigger argument to make would be that if we had called some of the bigger things that we saw earlier, like the boarding or the body in front of the net, we maybe would have had an opportunity to start informing the teams of where a better bar was and what more appropriate play was during the game to prevent them from even being interested in playing in the way that they were playing.
And a lot of those ones that we pulled out in this example are that fit the level of our game, right? So we're talking about that fit. Which one of those penalties would be one that is almost called every single time, all day long, if you see it? Doesn't matter the fit of the game even, really. In the chat, anybody? We go. Yeah, the hit, right? So that one is one of those ones that we need to be calling every single time. The rest has a different kind of like fit scale that kind of changes with our games, but that kind of stuff is a very much something that we need to be calling if we see it, obviously. So make sure that you get your viewpoint a little bit out.
Who can tell me what we needed to watch for specifically in relation to that hit? What is something that we should have been considering above and beyond whether or not the player bowled her over?
There's one, and there's two.
Yeah, so those really are the two that we want to be making considerations for. So I don't think in that case, we had contact from behind. Patrick's comment is important too, right? So that's a really important thing to think about. So did she mean to hit her? I would say probably yes. Did she mean to injure her? Probably not. So we're probably not considering a match penalty in that play, but we are considering a major, right? So if the initial contact was to the back or if it was to the head, we're definitely going to call the major penalty in that case. I don't think it was in that case. I think it was more, hip side kind of thing.
It started like it looked like it was going to go from the back. So that is a nice kind of the anticipation in our brains needs to be like, oh, it looks like it could be. But then she does turn. So it is to the hip, to the side. So not so much to the back. So,
yeah. But to go back to Patrick's question, intentionality does become of interest to us, right? Because from behind or to the head isn't the only reason to call a major penalty. And one of the reasons is if the hit is deliberate as well as aggressive.
Reckless.
So if it was both deliberate and aggressive, we would want to call a major penalty. I think we definitely know it was deliberate. I don't know if the final contact would be considered aggressive. But let's play it again, because we can do that.
Yeah, and there is another consideration for unsportsmanlike. David, there is another, as you were asking there, that is the next question. And it is subjective to you guys on the ice, right? Like, was that, because unsportsmanlike is more of the like dirty play, so it might fit that kind of thing as well. So those are the considerations that you guys need to take. So minor, unsportsmanlike, or the major, right?
Okay,
In this case, for this one.
here it is again.
And the other thing to kind of note is she doesn't give the full extension of the cross check either. So that could be another consideration in our head.
11 white for interference. She just skated into the other girl and she was pushing the other girl back. So she was preventing that girl from having a legal play on the ring.
That's a slash, like
No, it did happen, but it brought the girl down, which then caused her to trip somebody else. So
it's still a slash.
yeah.
And I'm seeing Patrick's comment there, which I think I talked about already, so that was perfect.
Yep.
Quit! Goalie ring.
The ones that are across the ice are hard to see with the video.
Yes, agreed. So what we're looking for here is the sweep of the back leg.
Right, so the
Definitely
slew
something
foot.
that we probably want to be calling. I would say that's an oopsie. It wasn't done on purpose, but it does result in red getting away.
Yeah, so the material impact there.
Yeah. I would agree with Cameron that I probably did speak to the coach longer than I should have in that case, but we do want to make sure that we communicate to coaches and with coaches when they have questions.
Yeah, the more calm we can all be, the more calm that they'll be too, right?
Yeah.
So if we cannot make anything get escalated, but that's on them too.
Well, Patrick, to your comment, one of the things we want to remember is we want to kind of classify our penalties two ways, our minor penalties two ways. We have our oopsie penalties. Our oopsie penalties are the penalties where we want to really evaluate that impact to the game. That's where we're applying our philosophy. 5% of the time, we have someone who does something on purpose. When someone does something on purpose and they do it aggressively, we want to make a major call. Anytime someone does something on purpose that's against the rules, we want to call a penalty. So if someone trips someone on purpose, it's a penalty, a tripping penalty. When someone trips someone on purpose and does it aggressively, that's a major penalty. So I like to talk about them as oopsies and must calls. Must calls are the ones where someone does something intentionally, although not aggressively, and oopsies are 95% of the penalties that we call. Something that someone just does in the course of the game that they thought was going to be a fine play, ended up not being a fine play, and resulted in, breaking of the rules as well as material impact of what was going on.
Okay, so coming up here, I have, my note is anticipate the hook. They're going into the boards together. So just anticipate those. Even if it doesn't happen, like here, that's where it actually happens. So here you'd be anticipating it because they're going in together. So anticipating something. Okay. And then I don't know exactly on these ones because it starts where you can't fully see it. And then here.
So anticipation is a really good point. Part of what we can do as we're watching the game go on is we can look to see how players come together, and we can imagine what could happen that would result in a penalty. So to Lauren's point, when those two players start going into the boards, as they're passing your position, based on how they're playing each other's bodies, you might want to be, prepping your head. You want to be imagining what it would look like if that ends up resulting in a body contact or a boarding as they get closer to the boards. And then as red really starts digging in at the white player along the boards on the way back up, we want to think, what would it look like if the way she's digging causes her to trip that player or causes her to hook that player, or if she applies just a little bit too much body and knocks the player down, right? Because that primes us so that when we see it, we can call it.
Right. That's the other important part about it. Paul says when we see it. So yes, we're anticipating something, but until it happens, we can't put our arm up, right? So until you see it. So it could just be a violation in the end, or it could be a penalty, or it could be nothing. So we just have to kind of wait to see, but anticipate it.
Yeah. And Lauren's right. There is danger in anticipating. As you start to develop making stronger and more regular penalty calls, that's only going to come if you start working on your anticipation. But the risk is, and the reality of it is, you will call something that you anticipated, even though it didn't end up happening. So, over time, you will embarrass yourself enough so that you can stop anticipating in the same way, but you'll have developed the instincts so that you really can just put your arm up when it happens. To David's point, so vocalization, verbals on the ice are a really important tool that we can use to encourage players to change the way that they're playing. So yeah, saying things like hands off, no pushing, sticks down, no hook, I suppose, would be good verbalizations to use when we see that play is coming near the line of something that we would call, so that we can encourage players to change their behavior before it results in a penalty situation. Again, in that sequence, our on-ice officials did not make a penalty call out of any of what we had seen there.
Which I think is fair. A little fair.
Yeah.
But within the fit and the scope of the game, we need to at least think about it. Oh, lead officials got to get ahead of the play a little more. Because we haven't put a positioning thing out there in a while.
Fair enough, and the back official needs to leave a little more space.
Even though it's across the ice, still needs to be behind.
Red ring.
So I don't think we have anything here that would be something that we'd want to penalize. If we think about our body contact principles and how we want everyone to avoid body contact, what we'll see out of this play. I went too far. Went too far.
Coming up.
Yes, Dominic, the net official could be closer to the net for sure. And so data, yeah, exactly. We've got a check on lower third of the stick for sure. But more importantly, I think that white has a path to avoid contact with this red player. The red player is not doing anything illegal. She's not putting her stick where it doesn't belong. White kind of closes up on her instead of playing closer to the boards. It puts too much pressure on herself and falls over her own stick when it gets
Red
checked.
ring.
Right, so she could play for the boards instead of trying to sweep out towards.
The other thing that Paul's kind of mentioning here is she does pull the ring into her body and kind of stand up a little bit more. So that is also a consideration that the officials on ice probably took as well. We get a change of sides.
Mm-hmm.
So we should be trying to do a couple more changes throughout, and even try and force a couple if you can. But we want different viewpoints of the ice and not always standing on the same side.
So what just happened there was that the ring went into the netting around the rink, which has resulted in a defensive zone free pass. Today's rules, because the ring stayed in the rink area and didn't go outside, even we would have a stoppage because it went in the netting and was unplayable. But we wouldn't do a defensive zone free pass. We'd give it to the goalkeeper. So yeah, that's all I have to say about this.
Right, and that's a rule change just to keep the speed of the game going a little bit quicker. I think that was the intention behind it.
Yep.
All right, so here you take a little look to see where everyone is as well, kind of see where the threats are. Everyone's nice and in front of you, so they were all close. But if someone was way up, you need to know. So that three-play line look over the shoulder is helpful.
I think this is a good example just to show that this official left too late. So exactly what Lauren was talking about. Coming back in the zone. The official does a bit of a shoulder check in a moment. Oh, sorry, did already. I missed that part. But really, when the white player gets the ring here in front of the net,
Yeah.
we should really, these players right here have just told us to go, right? Both these players are going up ice. We no longer have that risk at the free play line. And where is this player going to want to put the ring? She's not going to pass it to either of these girls. She's looking for open ice over here so she can make a pass to one of these girls. So we need to make sure that we start skating up ice to be in a position for them. It works out in the end because it's a U14B game.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a good one to see. All right. The on-ice officials have gone up for it. What do we all think it is?
In the text box.
I'm going to come back to it so we can see it. Oh, come on. I think I went way too far back. Just give it a second here. Everyone can prepare your answers with what you think it is.
I think it's like way up.
Yeah, all right.
Like 2 minutes. I think it's 37.
Here we go.
Oh, there it is. So never mind. Okay. That's it.
Okay. Post your answers to the chat and you can send it.
Okay, I got a couple people saying cross-check or trips. That kind of seems to be the consensus. And then body. So 3 different separate ones. You've got body contact, cross-checking, and the tripping as are your considerations.
Yeah.
So maybe let's look at it again.
Yep.
With those 3 in mind.
So it really does all come down to sort of how we look at the situation, right? How the players are coming together, where our center of focus is. Ideally, our center of focus should probably be small of the back, really. But that's not where we want to focus. That's just where we want our center of focus. And we want to be open to a much larger view so that we can kind of see the whole picture as it occurs. I'm going to let it go here in slow-mo. You can see that pressure, right? We see the placement of the stick and the arms across the player. Just going to super slow-mo go backwards for a second here. Focus a lot.
So based on the stick placement, would you consider tripping anymore? Probably not, because the stick isn't in the feet. So tripping is probably not the one that we consider, but it is a consideration in FastMo, right?
Yes, absolutely. So here we are with the initial contact, right? This is where the contact starts. Can anyone tell me what might be interesting to us about that initial contact? Yeah, so we're right in the numbers. So our initial contact is definitely from behind. The other thing we notice here is that the arms extend, right? So I want you to watch White's arms. It's not just we run into each other.
Yeah.
We extend the arms. And so to Laura's point, so Laura was a little unsure about why the girl fell backwards. So when that push happens, look at where her balance already is. So the ring carrier has made her balance somewhat be leaning backwards towards the player, right? She's put the pressure of her back into that stick that's on her. And so the forward push actually drives her feet out forward, which is why she falls back. But so we've got that contact, we've got that initial contact to the back, the stick is going across the back, and we've got that extension of the arms that brings the player down. So we definitely have a cross-checking penalty there, a major cross-checking penalty.
I would accept major body, but cross-check is definitely way more appropriate, right? Because that's where the stick placement is. If it's one hand, then that's when you consider body a little bit more. But when it's the two hands, that's when you're going to consider cross-check.
Notice that the free play line official just made a shoulder check to check out the scenario around the goalie, right? Because we could have a pulled goalie during this penalty call. And we need to make sure we know what that situation is before we address potential pour-in situation. So you didn't really quite hear that, I know, but we reported a body contact penalty. And if we think about who got to make the signal there, that'll really make it clear as to why we went with body contact over cross-check. So I'm just going to slip back here. Right, so the stoppage is over by the net, and our net official has their arm up as well. So our net official is going to end up getting to signal and report that penalty. And if we think about the angle that they had on that play versus the angle we had on the play, what's the more likely call for them to make, right? And so that's why we're going to come out of that scenario with a body contact penalty.
Angles matter.
Angles
That's why we
matter.
try to stay open to the play as much as possible. Angles matter.
So to answer Dominic's question in the chat, they've asked, in this case, would you go check with your partner to make sure it's the same call? I think you could. So here are some things that I'm thinking. So if you're not sure that they put their hand up at the same time as you, I would go and have that conversation. Like if you think that there's a possibility that they put their hand up for a different play, I would go have a conversation with them. Having watched this video, I think that they put their hand up at the same time we did, right? They put their hand up for the play that was happening at the time. If we think back to when we had the holding and the boarding, that was a scenario where we didn't want to call both. So we're probably not going to want to try to call both in this case either, right? We're not going to try to report both a body and a cross check because this happened at a time when from behind was not a major penalty. That would not have been a major penalty in this game. So we wouldn't have had to go have a conversation with our partner to say, yes, but it should be a major. And we definitely don't need to have a conversation with our partner to say it should be cross-checking, not body. There's no reason for us to make that differentiation inside of a game. Calling a penalty is good enough, right? We both had a penalty. We called a penalty. Whether or not we got exactly the right one isn't the end of the day. Your supervisor might ask you after. So if you're being supervised on the game, if I was supervising the game, I would have gone and asked the net official, what call would they have made in that case? Would they have reported a body contact penalty or not? And that would just be to understand if they were assessing things correctly and making the right decision. It's not a verdict about whether or not what was reported at the box was correct, right? Because also as a supervisor, I would get why the net official would call that body contact, not cross-checking, but I would want to know that the free play line official assessed it correctly to understand that it was cross-checking, not body, and why, so that we could at least have that conversation.
So, and then to David's point, when it's the 4 minutes and so the webcam that we have is very much the angle that you would see from behind. So in that case, with the rules that we have now, not there, that was initial contact to the back, and that would be where if they called it and didn't call it a major, you would go to them and tell them to call it a major because you saw the major. So therefore it is still the call that needs to be made as well, right?
Yes. To be fair, you would go and have a conversation about calling it a major, not necessarily telling.
That's right. Okay, that's fair. But you're going to be calling it a major. You have a pretty good reason to.
Yes.
So it's probably going to need to be called that.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, if I was having that conversation with my partner, I would skate over and say, I think we have the same penalty here. I just want to make sure it's from the same play. This is what I saw. From my perspective, initial contact was right in the numbers, and I think we have to go major on this. So I'd like to know what your opinion on that is, and if you saw something that would really tell you that what you're calling isn't major, but really that's what we should be reporting. So to Allison's question, the mechanic should be, so, I mean, I don't know where everyone is in their development pathway on this call. So if you were a level 1 or a level 2, you might not have started developing your understanding of whose responsibility is what on the ice yet, but we each kind of have different sections of the ice based on where we are. That's more our responsibility than it is our partners, right? So when we were watching this play happen, the net official was much closer to the play, right? The ring, not the penalty, but the play that occurred after the penalty, right? So the ring was in play behind the net official, where we don't have the greatest view of it from the free play line. So the expectation is that the net official is going to have the responsibility to blow down play when the team getting penalized gets control of the ring. In our situation on the ice, the net official had their arm up as well. So because they are a signaling referee who has blown their whistle, they will take responsibility for signaling the penalty where they are on the ice. If my partner didn't have their arm up, they would still be the one to blow the whistle because they're the nearest official to make the decision as to whether or not control was successfully gotten. But then the free play line official would be the person signaling because they are the current signaling official. Yeah, that's basically the gist behind those mechanics. If you were calling different penalties, so let's imagine that They had put their arm up for a body contact penalty that happened earlier than the cross-check we were calling, and they only signaled the body contact penalty. Then once they were done doing their signaling, we would do our signaling. We wouldn't whistle again. We would just do our signaling next.
And you
All
might
right.
also need to have the conversation there, only because that official who's calling the initial play down might not realize that you are also calling a penalty. So you, as the secondary official with that call, would then also go over and just chat with them to make sure that both of those calls are being made. And just for clarity's sake.
Yep. All right, let's continue this game.
It's a good stop from the official from following too far back. He stopped and let the play go ahead of him. But now he's a little behind. You got back. He figured it out a little more.
If you find yourself as the lead official moving up ice backwards and play is way on the other side of you going forwards, take the opportunity to transition to forward skating and follow it in that way.
Just stopped before she got in the zone.
So if we think, yeah, David, absolutely, hook, right? So if we think back to that very first penalty of the game, that little hooking where the stick kind of got stuck up there at the, like in front of the net near the very beginning of the game, compared to this hook that we're going to call right now, I think we should see a pretty drastic difference in terms of impact as well as aggressiveness of the hook, right? I do think that even in this case, that hook was accidental, but way too much force in her check, way up across the body, definitely spins that ring carrier around, and the ring carrier loses the ring because of it in her attacking zone. I'm going to back up so we can see it again. I have to go a little further. Whoa.
There's a lot of action on the free play line with this number 21, and I probably would have said a vocal of sticks because she's getting a lot up in her sticks, and that might have helped this other one not happen. Different player though. So
all right, so here it comes again. Right up in there, right? Slow-mo. Comes across, all the way across her body, spins her around, loses the ring. Definitely a hook impact.
I hope the other official had it too, but we don't know. Oh, he's got to bust up to get ahead of that ring. Yes.
So again, if we go back to body contact principles, right, and everyone has a responsibility to avoid body contact, and moving players who realize that contact might occur take action to avoid it, and all of that good stuff. I think it should be pretty clear that Red is committing some body contact stuff here.
Yeah.
Like it happens really fast in regular speed, right? But it's pretty clear here that right at this point is where Red should be doing something to avoid body contact. even if she didn't drop her shoulder
What do you want her to do?
to hit the player, like she needs to work to try to stop, or she needs to try to transition and pivot out of the way, because now that we have a ring carrier, the ring carrier has less she has less responsibility to avoid body contact. The checker has a greater responsibility. So now that this white skater has gotten control of the ring, red has a much greater responsibility to avoid body contact, and she's not going to.
There's time and space for her to avoid, and she doesn't use that time and space to avoid it.
And white loses the ring and falls to the ice because of it. So if I was supervising this game, I would definitely be having a conversation about why we didn't take that penalty, right? Like, why didn't we make that call as well? Now, it would have been a second penalty, right? Because we just called the hooking at the free play line. But even then, it definitely fits
14
the
red,
penalty
body
that we would
contact.
want to have in this game.
14 for body.
Oh, and we did. Never mind. They should have blown the whistle as soon as red got control. You'll remember when she kind of like swooped her stick over the fallen player and then batted the ring. That was enough for control. We should have had to stop it back there.
Because technically she had the ring and she batted it in a way that she wanted to. That's kind of the easiest way to think of batting with the stick, right?
Yeah.
It's got to have direction, it's got to have purpose. They really like to pass it up your side of the boards all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They really did.
Four.
We're always monitoring for that on the free play line. And we definitely didn't have the goalie being full in that scenario.
Okay, so once they come off the free play line, you should also come off with them too, just slightly there. And then go back to the line when they're getting back to the line. A vocal would have been nice there.
Very nice, yes.
A little bit
Good
high
sticks
up in
down
the...
when that
Touch white.
in the arms.
Four.
I like the spasmo.
This one's going to be very difficult for us to see. I'm still not clear on exactly what happened or which of the players.
I see it. It's the hook of the white stick from red.
But it's just a really good opportunity for us to talk about that we have to trust in our partner to make those calls, right? They are, the net official in that case was in a much better position than us to see it. Yeah.
Right. The angles are important. So sometimes you might not have the angle, and that's why your officiating partner is on the other side. So they hopefully have the angle for it.
Twenty-one, 17, 13.
Can you put your cursor up at the time?
Oh, yeah.
No worries. Usually I can figure out where. Okay. It's happening a little long.
I believe
Okay, for
her
the
knee
violation
actually
versus
ended
the
up on the
penalty
ring.
there. What's that?
I believe her
Oh.
knee ended up on the ring.
That's fair. But in those kind of situations too, the hold was a possibility there. So we do have to think in our brains, what's going to happen? Is this going to be all violation or all penalty or nothing, right? And in that case, it was a violation.
All right, so let's talk about this one. What do we think?
Red cutting back makes that interesting, was one of the comments that we had.
Where is it?
So again, as a reminder of our principles of body contact, that everyone has a responsibility to avoid body contact situations.
Yep, and we've got a ring carrier, so ring carrier has less responsibility. And the ring carrier is kind of making a decision based on White's trajectory to try to go around her, right? And then White, instead of continuing to skate through, throws on the brakes, which make it impossible at this point for Red to avoid her.
Yeah. And then the ring becomes out there and open.
She loses the ring, definitely loses a potential scoring opportunity, right? Because she's no longer able to drive to that shooting position. And by the time the next Red player is going to pick up that ring, it's going to be past kind of like the shooting position. So yeah, most likely we're going to have a body contact penalty for White there. I don't think I remember the officials in the game actually calling that, but maybe I'll be wrong about that in a moment. But yeah, it's not significantly different from the one we watched a moment ago, where Red hit White on the opposite side of the ice, right? Same kind of play. The hit is definitely different, right? The contact that they make with each other happens in a different way, but ultimately all of the principles are the same, the results the same, probably should be a penalty. To Patrick's comment, interference probably isn't a great fit here. You're not wrong about principles of interference and how those fit, but I think the contact is significantly different and neither player was stationary. So we're not going to be like in a pick style interference play. So I don't think we would want to see that as the call there.
And I think the other thing with interference too is as soon as that other player falls down, the body is just a better cell. So because she's now on her butt, for lack of a better word, she's there and she's been put there. So interference doesn't quite fit the resulting body on the ice, right? So that's why body is a much better call for this kind of situation. But interference, like Paul said, has the same kind of principles for this kind of case. So, yeah.
The only thing I'll add to that is that we could see a fall like this out of interference when we're talking about a stationary hit, right? Where that defender has set up that stationary pick and the contact happens coming out of that stationary position. we're not going to call body in that case. We're going to call interference because the player was stationary and the contact was caused by the moving player, although the moving player is not the one getting the penalty in that case. And yes, David, if red had continued skating towards the camera, most likely we wouldn't have a collision, or the collision that we would have had would have been insignificant and she likely would not have lost the ring. Wrong screen again. I was wrong. Our officials do have it. I see.
Oh yeah, hands up.
Yeah.
11 for body.
We'll go if they both had it. So she was getting her stick up a little bit high, the earlier first check.
There it is,
So
ladies,
we want to maybe
ladies.
get some vocals in there.
Quick!
All right, so that's game. So yeah, to Patrick's point, yes, it is an odd location, but it was the only section of glass that was clear. All the rest of the boards were solid white, and I don't think at the time they had any kind of surface that they could attach to where the netting was. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So that's basically the video that we had to present tonight in terms of a case study. We are absolutely open for questions and conversation at this point. Anything that you would want to bring up or address. But aside from that, we're pretty well through our content. We did it almost 7:01, so we spent an extra minute than we'd hoped to. But I was pretty convinced earlier today that we were going to be way over 2 hours. But we
Me
did it.
too, to be honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you guys
Yeah,
have any questions, you can unmute yourself, ask them away, or in the chat, ask away.
And also, if you have any feedback on the session, we'd be open to hearing that too. Like I said at the beginning, this is the first time we've done a case study like this. Wasn't 100% sure how it was going to go. I do think it went pretty well from my perspective. Yeah. I was worried that the first half was going to be so boring that people were going to drop off, but we seem to have kept everybody, so that's great.
Yeah, and I think we went more penalty focus. Well, overall, like we had to talk about the line, but the penalties really happened in the second half, and we talked more about positioning and some of those other things in the first half. So I think that's a nice balance. So.
Well, Patrick, for the short term, it will probably be mostly helmet cam games because that's mostly what I have available for us to use. But I am starting to do different kinds of filming of games, so there is a chance that we would have more stationary cameras in the future. Okay, well, hearing no specific conversation, I'm going to stop the recording at this point.